Vote. Good morning, everyone. My name is Anika Bowie. I chair the Restore the Vote Minnesota Coalition, which is over 90 organization that is in support of voter restoration for over 53,000 Minnesotans who live in our community and are currently on felony probation. We are here today and gathered of the anniversary of the March on Selma, which is the recognition for those before us who have advanced voting rights. So far today, the Restore the Vote bill has passed through 3 hearings, and we're really excited about that. That is a success for our democracy as well as voting rights here in Minnesota. I will be moderating this press conference, and we ask for all of the media to hold their questions or comments towards the end. We have a substantial list of speakers who are going to give narratives and give reasons on why this is good logic, this is good policy for all of the Minnesotans here today. So we are going to begin with George Gibson, who is directly impacted and is going to give his narrative on Restore the Vote.
Good morning. I'm George Gibson. I'm the owner of Next Step Services, which is a social business enterprise that works with men and women with barriers to employment. And as a disenfranchised, I certainly understand the felony conviction on the back of our backs and how hard it is to reintegrate into community. And for me, Restore the Vote is so incredibly important as a part of reintegrating back into community. As a business owner, I certainly get all of the different intricacies of community reintegration, but there's a bigger issue than just restoring the vote. That for me, it's been part of my piece of being able to have my voice in the governance as someone who I have my business taxes, and on my way in I was like, I have my gas taxes today and all of these things. And historically, our government has been founded on taxation and representation, that if no taxation, no representation has been an integral part of the governance of our country, that as a citizen, when I've been a returning citizen back into my community, my first piece that I wanted to do was to be able to vote and to be able to be a part of having a voice in the governance of the issues that are really super important to me, like school board issues, the state government, our national voting pieces. And part of being a former incarcerated individual that's been a returning citizen is that I just want to fit into community. I want to be a part of the fabric of community, and I want to see those that have gone down the same path, that are back into community, have the right to be able to vote. And I was reminded this morning of Sarah Wall. I love history. That she had this no taxation without representation that was the spearhead for Susan B. Anthony as women's voting rights were restored, that no taxation without representation was that kind of an anchoring kind of piece for us. And so there are so many impacted individuals, 52,000 men and women that can't vote, that just need to be restored. And this reaches across the aisles for me. It's a constitutional issue that we all in our communities need to have a voice in our governance. So with that, thank you for coming.
Now we're going to ask for Danny Gibbons to come and give his testimony as well.
Good morning. My name is Pastor Danny Gibbons. I'm an activist and organizer in the community, a faith leader, among a number of things. But more importantly, I'm a person who is an incarceration survivor. At the age of 18, I had served 12 years in prison for shooting an unarmed, not shooting unarmed, I'm sorry, I'm mixing up my thing, for shooting an off-duty police officer by the name of Lieutenant Art Blakey. We exchanged fire, and I served 12 years in prison for that particular crime, came home, was blessed to do a public reconciliation with him and other work moving forward, as well as a lot of the community activist work. Have been blessed to have wonderful opportunities to assimilate, to start participating in society by paying taxes and those kind of things, but I've consistently ran in this barrier around a decision that I made when I was 18 years old. I mean, I've done all of this work in this community to contribute to giving back, to impacting change in these ways, and yet I can't get property rented to me because I'm a formerly incarcerated person. Yet I can't get all these different barriers. And then thinking about, more importantly, my rights being restored as a citizen to vote. Now I'm off of parole now, so I'm able to vote, but thinking about the landmark campaign of Obama. I came home when the year Obama was elected. I never had an opportunity to vote up until 2000. Last year was my first time ever voting in my life, and I voted locally because I didn't like this national stuff that's going on. So I was like, I'm cool on that campaign. But what it felt like walking into the place where I went to vote for the first time was probably one of the most dignifying experiences I've had as a human being who has had the experiences that I've had, and what it meant for me and what it continues to mean for me. I'm a parent now. I have 3 children that I represent and raise in this work, and want to be able to participate in this voting structure to assist in impacting change for their life in the years to come, as well as my other siblings that are still incarcerated themselves, that are coming home with this desire and aspiration to participate in society in all of the ways that we're able to. So I fully support this narrative, and I appreciate this opportunity. Thank you.
Hi, I'm State Representative Raymond Dehn, and I'm in committee right now, so I will try to be brief as I have to run back to committee. I believe I may be one of the only people in the state legislature who has lost their right to vote prior to being elected. And while I talk about that in great lengths, what I really want to talk about is the feeling that many individuals who have made some bad choice in their lives on Election Day feel. They feel alienated. They're not part of the general public. They see their friends voting, and that's something that's really, really critical. I know that sometimes we hear that members in the House and Senate might say, well, that's part of their crime. Their supervision is part of their crime. Remember, when our state constitution was written, there was no such thing as probation. There was no such thing as parole or supervision. And that has been added through statute through years. I think it's time that we join our neighbor to the northwest, North Dakota, that allows those individuals who are no longer locked up the ability to vote and participate in society. It's probably one of the most important pro-civic behavior we can ask. And as I look back, I think that it's not the type of thing that an individual who may be struggling in either their probation or their timeout that they immediately go to when they think about making another bad decision. They're like, oh, maybe I shouldn't do that because I'm going to get my right to vote back in 5 or 10 years. That's not the process that goes through. So I think it will make life not only for those individuals but for all of us better when Election Day comes and all of those individuals who are out in society participating in their families, raising their kids, going to work, have that ability to vote. So I'm not going to be here for questions, but if anybody has any, feel free to reach out to my office. Thank you. And my great Senator Bobby Joe Champion, who I have the pleasure of representing in the House.
That's right. And I appreciate that representation, let me just say. I am Senator Bobby Joe Champion, and I am the Senate author of Restore the Vote. And this is not my first time putting this legislation forward. It's several times that I've been doing this since I've been here. And some people ask me the question, why do you do it? Why is it so important? Because I believe that it's important for us to improve the quality of life of all Minnesotans, and that starts with their opportunity to vote, those who cannot, those who are being denied the opportunity to vote. And people say, well, hold it. Isn't this just an urban issue? This is just an urban issue. And then I remind my good friends, because I practice law, and even when I'm in Shakopee and some of the other districts, I remind them that 64%, and some say 70% now, of the 53,000, at the time it was 57,000 individuals who are unable to vote are from outstate Minnesota. While only 36% at the time, but now some say it's 30, only 36% of those are from Hennepin and Ramsey County. So if you see the diverse faces, I was struck by the fact that there's a cross-section of people who understands the importance of our democracy, and they understand the importance of being able to vote. We in Minnesota, we believe in redemption. This is a step towards that redemption. Because if there's a person who made a bad decision, they should not be perpetually punished for that bad decision. We should create opportunities for them to vote and to demonstrate the importance of our democracy to their children as well. This is a pro-social activity that we all should embrace and feel like everyone should have the opportunity to vote. Last but certainly not least, I sometimes remind people that I door knock even during non-election years. and out door knocking, I often run across people who tell me over and over again, after I give them my speech, and I think I'm sometimes the most eloquent person around at the time, and then at the end of it, they say, hey man, I would vote for you, but I can't vote. And then I say, why can't you vote? Are you still on paper or parole? Some say yes, but some say no. And if they say no, then I say, you can vote. And then they say, no, I can't. I say, yes, you can. Who's the lawyer here? Right? But think about that. It's not just for the individuals who have passed probation and those who still sit on probation or on paper and can't vote. But think about that deeply, if you will, just for a moment. Just think about the fact that we should not have individuals saying, I can't vote because I'm on paper. That shouldn't be. They should have the opportunity, as we all should embrace the opportunity to vote. And so, last but certainly not least, I hope that you will join me with making sure that my Senate colleagues understand the importance of a hearing, understand the importance of hearing these voices, and not be derailed by individuals saying this. Well, isn't probation a part of their sentence? And shouldn't we just concentrate on shortening the probationary periods? My response, and I hope that you'll join me in this response, is we can do that too.
Exactly.
It's not one or the other. We could do that too.
That's right.
Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
Speaking of cross-sections of culture, my name is Max Reimer, and I am with the Republican Party, and I can tell you that in the green room, no one put me in a headlock. So I'm with the Liberty Caucus, so what we do is we're part of the Republican Party. We advocate for freedom within our party. We advocate for libertarian principles, and ultimately we think that it is time for legislation like this because we are not about constant, as you mentioned, incarceration. We want people reintegrated into society. We want them to feel that if they did commit a crime, that they are ready to come back and work and pay taxes. We hope they vote for candidates who want them to pay less taxes. That's our goal. But at the end of the day, we will be helping our Republican legislators be accountable to this type of legislation. We don't feel like there is a broad appetite for constant incarceration. You see that at the federal level. Donald Trump did author one of the most sweeping prison reform bills that is out there right now. So we want to take a lot of these principles that we think there is broad level support on, broad level appeal for, and advocate for those principles in a way that makes sense to people who love liberty, who love freedom, who want to be part of that process. So there will be support for this bill in the Republican legislature. Nick Zerwas, Representative Nick Zerwas, was one of the co-authors of the bill, and we look forward to helping the process along. I'm Max Reimer with the Republican Liberty Caucus. Forgive me, it's my first time doing this, so thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Pastor Brian Herron with Isaiah and also represent the State Baptist Convention. We're in the season of Lent, and the book of Isaiah says that the fast that I want, this is God speaking, is to break the chains of injustice and to untie the cords of oppression, to break every yoke. We have an injustice, and it's an injustice because when one group of people are more adversely affected by a policy or a law than others, that's injustice. It's immoral because when somebody has satisfied their time and you continue to punish them, and the punishment, the continuum of punishment is so oppressive that people end up going back, that's immoral. We need to restore the vote. This voter law is really deeply rooted in the voter suppression laws of Jim Crow.
That's right.
And now the lynchings are of the spirit. It is important that we restore the vote so that mothers and fathers, sisters and brothers, uncles and aunts, nieces and nephews, our neighbors can feel hope and restoration and feel a redeeming quality rather than continuing to serve under injustice and oppression.
Good morning. My name is Jen Paulzine, and I have the privilege of serving as the CEO at Tubman, where each year we serve over 25,000 people of all ages who have been victims of crime and experienced oppression, whether that be domestic violence, sex trafficking, homelessness, addiction, or extreme poverty as well. In addition to crisis intervention services that address the immediate safety and well-being, we work alongside people while they reestablish their future and heal from that trauma that they've experienced. We also offer therapy for people who have used violence, and that emphasizes personal accountability as well as the tools to change future behavior. For the survivors and the families that we work with, a critical piece of that long-term stability is rebuilding connections. And many have been isolated by abusive partners, by traffickers. They've lost their relationships because of addiction or been pushed to the margins of society by homelessness and poverty. Many are youth, and many have criminal records. We work with them to resolve any criminal justice issues they have, and then we help them move into their future. And voting is one piece of that rebuilding connections. Restoring the right to vote does not jeopardize the safety of victims, survivors, or community members. I'd also like to point out that our organization is named after Harriet Tubman, conductor on the Underground Railroad, Civil War soldier, suffragette, and so much more. During her lifetime, felony disenfranchisement laws were one tool used to systematically prevent freed Black Americans from participating in elections. Today, we know those laws continue to disproportionately affect minority and marginalized communities, and that's not the legacy we want to continue here in Minnesota. Anything that effectively creates second-class citizenship in this country is a betrayal of all that Harriet Tubman stood for.
That's right.
Restoring the vote is an opportunity to do better.
Good morning, I'm Melvin Carter, and I'm the mayor of St. Paul, Minnesota. I want to say thank you to George, to Pastor Danny for sharing your stories. Those stories that we've heard this morning should frustrate, should anger us all.
Yes.
No one benefits when thousands of Minnesotans are sentenced to years, sometimes decades, of taxation without representation long after they've served their debt to society and returned to our communities. This practice is an affront to the promise of representative government, and it must end now. Furthermore, too much of our criminal justice system is based on the premise rooted in America's Jim Crow past that pushing people to the margins of our society somehow benefits the public good. I was reminded of that notion just last month in Alabama, in Birmingham, Alabama, attending the funeral of my 99-year-old great aunt, when we came across, looking through some papers, a sheet of paper on which was printed poll tax receipt.
Yeah.
And it was her receipt for the $1.50 it cost her in 1963 to cast a vote in Birmingham, Alabama. I think about my Aunt Bay, and I know that as much as that $1.50 probably meant something to her, in Birmingham, Alabama, it was possibly the least of her worries, casting a vote as an African-American woman. In St. Paul, we're rejecting that logic and reversing it with the notion that we build a safe community by bringing people in, by connecting people to community, by ensuring that people can be a part of our community. One of my constituents recently said to me, you know what, I came out, I returned to our community, and they told me, go be a contributing member of society, but if I can't live here, if I can't work here, and I can't vote here, what is a contributing member of society?
Yeah.
And so this is why we are advancing our community-first public safety framework in St. Paul. But you know what? We need help from the state. We need policies from the state that help us to do that. That's why restoring voting rights is important. That's why probation reform is important. That's why post-conviction relief is important. That's why everything that we can do when people re-enter our community to say, you are a part of our community, we want you to be a part of our community, and this is a safe, stable, welcoming, and promising place for you. Everything that we can do benefits all of us. It helps our communities to be safer, and it helps to ensure that we are building a state that works for all of us. I want to thank the legislative leaders who are here pushing this forward, and I want to tell you on behalf of me and many of my constituents that we are here with you. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is John Choi, and I have the honor and privilege of serving as our Ramsey County Attorney. And for a very long time, and as well as our Minnesota County Attorneys Association, we believe very strongly that we need to pass this bill. It's been too long. Senator Champion, I don't know how long you've been fighting for this bill, but it's been too long. And the reason why I think that the passage of this bill is so critical, it's because it speaks to our values as a state, as a community, about what we think about this notion of rehabilitation, reintegration, redemption. President Donald Trump wasn't the first president, and he won't be the last president who said that this country is a country of redemption and premised on second chances. But we need to start living those values. We have constructed laws in the state of Minnesota and a criminal justice system that is focused too much on punishment. And when we get to a place when somebody has done everything that we as a society has asked them to do, that they have accounted for what they have done, we as a society need to focus on helping and supporting that rehabilitation and reintegration. We don't do enough in trying to wipe out the scarlet letter on people's foreheads. When we have people in our society who are marginalized and are becoming second-class citizens, that's when all of this starts to fall apart for the state of Minnesota and our community. And so today I stand here very proudly with all of these great advocates to advocate for change, and this will be a better way for our community. Thank you.
That's right.
Good morning. I'm Mike Freeman, and I'm Mr. Choi's counterpart as County Attorney in Hennepin County. I'm pleased to be here to announce again the support of the Minnesota County Attorneys Association for this and the support of most law enforcement. We're the people who enforce the laws. But we believe when a person has finished their time of incarceration, they are being restored to citizenship, and one of the key aspects of citizenship is the right to vote. As a man of faith, as well as a county attorney, it's also the right thing to do to restore their vote. Right. Restoring voting rights to everyone in our community is a matter of justice. Disenfranchisement of our neighbors on probation and parole serves no legitimate penal function, and it serves no legitimate electoral function. I don't think anyone can seriously argue that the threat of disenfranchisement defers crime. Our campaign to restore the vote modernizes our laws to help make it live up to the correct vision that voting is a fundamental right of citizenship. Second, an enormously broad section of our law enforcement community believes restoring voting rights is good for public safety. We as a society have decided that our neighbors on probation and parole deserve a second chance to live in our communities and take on the rights and obligations of citizenship. It's a key part of their return to the community and standing in their community, which is a key part of voting. Finally, the present law is a mess for enforcement. There are so many people, like has been testified before, don't vote even though they can. There are all sorts of people who were mistaken and are on parole that go and vote, and then they've violated the law. The law is confusing. It costs a lot for us to enforce. I have a lot more important things to do, as do your police officers, than trying to enforce this archaic law. If North Dakota can have it, for goodness sakes, why can't we? And so I'm honored to be with faith leaders. Bobby Joe, this isn't the first time We have testified for it in this room. So I think this is overdue, ladies and gentlemen. Let's go get the Senate to have a hearing and pass the bill.
That's right.
Good morning, Paul Schnell, Commissioner of the Minnesota Department of Corrections, and I'm honored to have the opportunity today to stand in support of the bill, this work. It is critical. This is the time for us to allow people who have paid their debt to the opportunity and the right to vote. We believe and we know that community connectedness is what's matter. It's what matters. It's for all of us. This is the thing that keeps us connected, keeps us feeling active and a part of our communities. And for us, in the Minnesota Department of Correction, if our goal is, in fact, to reduce recidivism, to have people return to their communities better, one of the first things that we can do is provide them with the opportunity to cast their vote. It's simple. And I'm proud to represent Governor Walz and Lieutenant Governor Flanagan in support of this, and I encourage all Minnesotans to rally and support the opportunity for people to cast their vote. Thank you.
So thank you, advocates of Restore the Vote Minnesota. I believe if you're looking for a headline, that we all stand here firmly believing that Minnesota Jim Crow must go. That's right. Amen. That it is time, it's long overdue, that these bills, these laws needs to be changed. The Senate must have a hearing on this immediately. This is urgency. So I'm going to open up the floor for any questions.
Senator Champion, you mentioned you've tried this bill before several times in the past. What's different this time?
Thank you for that question. I say what's different this time. I think the opportunity that folks have had to, understand how the current state of Minnesota statute section 609.165, which is the statute that prohibits individuals from voting, is just understanding the impact of that. And understanding that it's a problem across our state. That's why I cited those statistics earlier. And when you think in terms of every corner of Minnesota being affected, we then know that we should make sure that our representatives come and represent our voice here. And the voice of the people says, we want everyone to vote. Restore the right to vote. It is redemption, it is the right thing to do, and we should do it today. And so that's what I think is different.
Can I just get a clarification? Exactly how would this bill work? What would it change? As I understand it, once you're out, then you can vote.
Absolutely. So as it sits right now, therein lies the bright line. We think that's easy to enforce. We think it includes as many people as humanly possible. And it goes back to, I'm sure the theologians really won't mind me using a biblical reference. It goes back to the notion of giving people a second chance or opportunity, just like the prodigal son. When the prodigal son went and made a decision that wasn't the best decision, the scripture says when he came to himself, and then he came back home, his father welcomed him with open arms. And so I think that's what we're all doing. We are holding our arms open, saying that we think everyone should have the right to vote, especially if they're not in prison or incarcerated.
What other states have this? You mentioned North Dakota a couple of times, but how does it break down nationally?
14 other states.
Anyone knows?
Yeah, I think there's about 14 other states total that have. But I think what's important is that in North Dakota, their constitutional language, the actual words, it's actually the same as ours. But somehow they came up with a system by which they have a much better one. It's simpler to understand. I mean, basically, if you're incarcerated, you can't vote. But once you're out, it's you can vote, and you're encouraged to vote. In our system, we have people who are on parole, probation, and there's a lot of confusion. As an elected official, I've talked to so many people who have told me exactly what elected officials have said, that they can't vote for me. And then with some questioning, I find out that actually they can vote, but they thought that they couldn't. And I think that is something that's fundamentally wrong, and it's because of the system that we have. It's complicated. And so the better system, and I think that the one that is really focused around reintegration, redemption, is the one that, really the system that North Dakota has. And this is what Senator Champion and Representative Dehn and all of the advocates here for Restore the Vote have been fighting for. And it's really, it should be a bipartisan issue.
Well, I'll throw one more out there then. Senator Champion, in the Senate, this is where it's going to happen or not. How many Republicans you got? Any?
Well, you asked really good questions. I'm not certain I wanted him to ask another question. Thank you for that question. I believe that we have, I know that we have broad support. I think that broad support is not always represented just in who signed onto the bill. There's also an ideological issue that we have to overcome. This is where we need individuals to question individuals who are in charge of committees who are denying us an opportunity to have a committee hearing so that folks can hear the persuasiveness of those around this room, but also decide where they are, right? And so there's a cross-section of support, but if you're not a chair, if you're not in control of that, sometimes that makes it very difficult. And so, again, I think they recognize that it is something that we should do. And earlier I talked about there's this movement that says, well, let's shorten the probationary periods. That's the reaction right now. When, in fact, I believe that we can do both because we can walk and chew gum at the same time.
So thank you. That's going to be the closing for this press conference. If you have any more questions, we have individuals here. I would like to get also the information of each reporter here so we can keep track of who's, supporting Restore the Vote and covering Restore the Vote. My name is Anika Bowie. This is the Restore the Vote Minnesota Coalition, as well as advocates who stand strongly. Want to say thank you so much for joining us today. This press conference is adjourned.